Jason, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's an honor to have you here.
I appreciate you having me, Derek. Looking forward to this chat.
Good, man. Well, let's jump right in. How did you get started in sales consulting?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to go way back, just
Hmm.
kind of like, start from the beginning. So I'm a product of two self-employed parents. My
Wow.
parents, who now are both in their early 70s, have been entrepreneurs since their early 20s. Right.
Mm.
So they grew up being entrepreneurs before it was cool to say you're an entrepreneur. Like everybody wants to be an entrepreneur today. Right.
Right, right,
But they
right.
were, they were doing it, and they were in the true hustle, service-based businesses, never had businesses more than seven figures. Right. They were the true lifestyle entrepreneur business owners, and they happen to do it as a couple. Over the course of the last 50 years, they've owned or operated between 7 and 8 different businesses, have
Wow.
sold some, have laid some down. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial household where really the success of our family from a monetary standpoint was the success of our business.
Right.
But it also, I was attuned to work from home culture and having parents around because they valued being part of our lives as kids. I have an older brother, younger sister, and so I was kind of on the cutting edge of seeing what work from home and entrepreneurship can do from a family standpoint and in success standpoint. So I saw the ups, I saw the downs, but my journey really started when I was a kid. And out of my three siblings, I was the first one to kind of strike it out on my own. My
Okay.
older brother followed shortly after, and my sister is gainfully employed, but she also is considering some things on the side as well. So it's, if you could ever say it's in our blood, entrepreneurship's in our blood.
Literally, literally.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, but that sounds like it would be intense to
Yeah.
entrepreneurial and parents, because entrepreneurs, the reputation that we have is that we're highly driven,
Yep.
and we work a ton of hours.
Yep.
So what was that family dynamic like, really? Because you might have learned all the valuable lessons, and if you
Mhm.
put that positive spin on it. But
Sure.
my dad also entrepreneur, did a lot of different things, and
Yep.
as a result was kind of MIA at times, right?
Sure.
So, and I know
Yeah.
from my own standpoint, that's what, when I started this, my kids will tell you now, like, we hardly ever saw our dad during those times, the early days.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So for the way it really operated early on, when we were all young, me and my siblings, my dad was the one doing, he was gone, you know,
Hmm.
at the office doing the stuff, right? Managing the people, and my mom did a lot of the payroll, the admin stuff kind of at home. So she was
Nice.
able to
Okay.
be at home. We had an office downstairs in our basement. So when mom had to go down there, we kind of knew, we had to leave her alone for a little bit,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But my dad
Nice.
burdened a lot of the leaving the home, right? So
Okay.
but one of the things that they invested in early on is they invested their time and money into other people because they
Mm.
didn't want to live to work. They wanted to work to live.
Wow.
So they were able to, and quite honestly, in some ways, probably hurt their business from a financial standpoint to have more employees maybe than they actually needed. But the benefit to them was worth it because they were able to work in some level of a schedule. My dad was very much he was, drinking his cup of coffee out the door at 7, was home at
Hmm.
5, reading the paper in the chair, kind of like that old school,
Yeah.
Rockwellian type of picture. But that's
So he was a
yeah,
fixture. He was there. It
he was
wasn't.
there.
Yeah.
Yep.
It
And
was
we
still
were super involved in sports, and he didn't miss many games, if any. He was the one driving us, coaching us, talking to us. So
wow.
they
Wow.
found a nice balance. Now, that being said, it's not all rosy, right? My parents got divorced when I was in college.
Mm.
So some of which could have been like their work and personal life was so intermingled that there's a downside of that there. Now, I'm grateful to share that they're both friendly again and friends, and they hang
That's a
out
lot.
together, and so that's
Wow.
all wonderful, but like, which is not normal. We're grateful for that, but there is downsides to that, right? So my wife is a children's pastor, right? So she has a very different job than the job I have, and
Right.
it
Right.
balances us out because she knows what I have to do, I know what she has to do, but we're not doing the same thing, running the same business. So there's
Interesting.
value with separation.
Yeah, there is. There is. My wife, she'll say it jokingly, but I don't like salespeople. She's in accounting. She's in the finance department, right? She
There you go.
manages project manager. So she's removed from
Sure.
sales. I mean, she sends invoices. She collects,
Right.
manages
Right.
the numbers and the bean. She's a bean counter, as I always tell her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Right. Sure. She
but
loves that.
yeah, she doesn't like salespeople. So there you go.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, opposite,
Sure.
not at all in the same lane, but
Yep.
opposites attract in that way. And we find balance
Absolutely.
each other. Right. But no, that's
Agreed.
always interesting because I know the burden that entrepreneurial path can create, but also to your point earlier on, it creates an incredible amount of inspiration. It creates a path and a true, ambition that you can follow through on. And
Mhm.
I love that was seeded in you early. I think it was final years of high school. My dad gave me a Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he was really
Mhm.
trying to
Great book.
instill in me early on, like, think broadly, don't think like an employee.
Yeah.
There's other ways to, garner wealth and grow and so forth. So
Yeah. I read that
it's just,
book in my early 20s myself. So yeah, very, very good
yeah,
book.
foundational read,
Yeah,
guys.
foundational. Absolutely.
Exactly. So talk to me about your practice. Now you let's unpack the segue from leaving college, getting into banking,
Yep.
finance, and then somehow segueing into starting your own sales consultancy. What's
Yeah.
that brief story look like?
Right. So picking it up. So I went to college to get a business and finance degree to go into the family business. As I just stated earlier, my parents got divorced when I was a sophomore in college,
Yeah, I mean,
and
awkward, I'm
businesses kind
sure.
of separated, right? Like
Mm,
so my businesses separated. My dad and mom sold two of their two main businesses and then started to go their separate ways to do their own things. So what I once thought was going to be the dream of like life is a straight line. I'm going to do all these things, get in the family business. Life's going to be easy. As we know, that's not the way it's designed. There's a lot of zigzags and stop signs and detours. And that was my first detour when it came to what I thought I was going to do professionally.
right.
Gratefully, I got an opportunity. I interned at Merrill Lynch for 3 years. I thought I was going to go be a financial advisor, but that was during the dot-com crash. So I had to pivot from doing that because my job offer was put on hold. And then I got picked up by Wells Fargo. So I worked for Wells Fargo for 10 years. I worked in their consumer finance banking end and basically managed loan production offices for Wells Fargo. So spent 10 years doing that, climbing up the corporate ladder, multiple promotion, moved 6 times in 11 years, and got a really good education on consumer and business finance, banking, and in all of those things. So I was grateful for that opportunity. Moved back to Buffalo, where I reside now, back in 2010. Worked for another bank for a short period of time, but then got headhunted to run a small, privately held, family-owned financial services company, and that was kind of my first step back into getting back to my roots, I guess you would say, and that small business, family entrepreneurship side of things. So, did that for almost 6 years. Over tripled the size of the organization, got some equity in it, but family business was going one way, my trajectory was going a different way,
Another
and
zig and another zag.
another zig and another zag, right?
Right.
When you think there's a straight line, there wasn't. And then I was faced with a decision of now what do I do? Right. There was a kind of a differing of opinion in where I wanted the business to go and where they wanted the business to go. Not being family, they made their decision and they moved on one way. And then I was left trying to figure out what do I really want to do next?
Right.
And this is kind of where the sales consultancy was born. I quite honestly, and this is just being direct, like I kind of was sick of making other people very wealthy and me getting the crumbs. And I know that sounds very selfish, but I'm an all in type of person. So
Right.
when I'm going into these businesses, whether it's corporate banking or whether it's family business, everything I have is going into it. And the thoughts of me going and building another business without controlling my own destiny just seemed like a bad decision. As a matter of fact, before I started my company, Nacre Consulting, the sales consultancy, and the growth consultancy, I actually had a job offer that was going to pay me multiple six figures,
Okay.
and I turned it down with no job
You
prospects.
burn the boats.
I burned the ships. That's
Mhm.
absolutely. And people thought I was crazy. And I said, and people said, why did you say no? And I said, I feel so moved and pushed into this direction to just try it myself. I'm an entrepreneur from the get go, from
It's
being a
in your
kid. My parents
DNA.
are entrepreneurs. It's in
Mhm.
my DNA. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror one day and saying, if you're as good as you think you are, go all in and do it.
Right.
And I'll never forget the face and the managing director when I turned down this offer. He said, "Do you want
Are
to
you
think about
crazy?
this?" He's like, "Do you want to think about this?" Because he actually knew my situation, and I said, "Listen, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful that you would have that investment, both financially and emotionally, in me." I said, "But I have to do this for myself." At the time, I was 37 years old, just turned 38. I was like, if I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it when I'm 55,
Mhm.
right? Like, I'm just not going to do it. So
Mhm.
let's
You have the
burn the
energy
ships. Let's
now
swing the
to
bat. Let's
burn it
do
at
it,
both
right?
the candle at both
Yeah,
ends and do whatever it takes to turn this
do
thing
whatever it
on.
takes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I went all in. Nacre Consulting. People say, like, what does that mean? So Nacre is the organic compound that creates a pearl, right? So
Oh, and
the
Jason Pearl. Yeah, there you
Jason
go.
Pearl. So my last name's Pearl. So the reason I named it Nacre Consulting is I've always intended to have my practice be a boutique firm, not always just be a solopreneur, but have a couple people working with me. So
Okay.
I had enough foresight in the beginning. A lot of people don't like to work for the person's name, right? Like,
Yeah,
unless you're
yeah,
a
yeah. I'm
law
with you.
firm,
That's
right? Like,
literally
people
why I didn't
don't,
call mine like Williams Consulting or something, or
right?
Derek Williams, because it's just I didn't want to make it about me.
That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. So I wanted to be able to bring really good, talented people in and have this boutique growth consultancy together. So Nacre Consulting was born about 20 days after I had broken up with this other organization, and I just started in growth mode. And what I did was I made a goal for myself that I was going to talk to two new people every day for 6 months. So 5 days a week, two new people, and just talk to them. You know, find out what they're doing. They find out what I'm thinking about doing. I'm asking opinions. I'm asking thoughts. I was asking very boldly for introductions to people. If you think there's someone else that can help me, do that. So
Right.
I did that for about 6 months, and every client in the first 3 to 4 years of my consultancy could be drawn back to those two meetings a day with different people.
Wow. Wow.
And
There's a
that's
hack
kind of
right
how I did it.
there.
Yeah, that's how I
Well,
did it.
let me back up because
Sure.
there's some pieces of this that I want to tie together with the audience. So your time with Wells Fargo specifically, I think, was really instrumental in your getting to where you are now as
Mhm.
well, right? Like
Yes.
you were effectively consulting other branches, other offices, right? Talked a little bit
Yeah.
about that. You had a success as a leader and did so well that now they wanted you to go and help other teams do that,
Right.
is my understanding.
Yeah. So I started out in a management trainee position. So I did
Okay.
like sales for 9 months, killed it, got an assistant manager job, and then got a manager job 9 months later. Right. So
Hmm.
within 18 months of me being there, 23 years old, I was managing people. And my first management assignment was in this small town in Northeast Ohio. And it was a abysmal performing branch. And within 23 months, I made it the best branch in the region.
Love
And then
that.
they said, okay, this kid may be onto something. So I was kind of coined the fixer, and they kept sending me to like broken places and fixing them. Right. So I got a knack in my 20s of how to go into a situation where the majority of the employees were older than me, both in seniority within the organization and age as a human being.
Right. And just,
But yeah,
yeah, this more experience in that arena as well.
right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just kind of went in and said, like, I was able to figure out how to work with the people, how to understand how the people operate and what made them tick. And I was able to slowly but surely start to transform what they wanted out of a leader, what I could give them, and what we needed out of them as employees to be able to turn the branch around. So I did that 4 times. And then I was promoted to be like an area manager.
Right.
And I was moved to New Jersey. I had, almost a dozen retail locations, and then kind of did that with a district, and then did the same thing for a region. And essentially I became a consultant for these branches and for these areas that were underperforming. So, the self-proclaimed kind of fixer mentality was just something I got good at. And then I left Wells Fargo because Wells and Wachovia merged together in the right around 2010, and they wanted to move me again. And I had a young family. I had one daughter, another one on the way. I'd moved my wife 6 times in 11 years, and I was like, okay, like enough's enough.
Poor thing.
Well, Wells Fargo had been wonderful to me, and to this day, I still credit them for my education in business early on.
Right.
But I just said, okay, enough's enough. So they were gracious enough to say, hey, okay, if you want to exit, we'll give you a severance and we'll move you wherever you want to move. So
Wow.
I did a
Wow.
regional job search. HSBC at the time was headquartered in Buffalo, New York. They're an international bank, but they had their national headquarters in the United States in Buffalo. And they created a job for me to be a consultant for branches, you know, and I would go in and I would do growth consulting for these branches. So I just got really good at seeing opportunities in broken areas and in broken places. And that has really informed the way I consult. Now, I don't consult just with people that are underperforming, but a lot of the methodologies are similar to get
Right.
growth out of the people, and then the revenues come with that, you know? So it's kind of the people over profits type of thing.
Well, and then the thing I do like about that is for those that are thinking about getting into consulting in the future that are in a sales capacity today is establishing that track record A1. Like you, in order to get to that point down the way, you have to first master the level that you're at. I'll never forget early days wanting to start a sales consultancy, sales training firm one day. But I knew I wasn't ready. I needed to hit the mark, if you will, multiple times. And so you did that, you proved yourself and you were promoted and people asked for you to come into other areas. And so if that sort of thing is happening to someone here in the audience, if you're listening, watching, and that's kind of the trajectory you feel like you're on, you've hit the mark multiple times, people are asking you to come in and fix things or take over teams, you're headed in the right way. Now, when you jumped off, though, I guess when you turned that offer down that you mentioned, and when you burned the boats, you started building a personal brand and you started out solo at first before, you didn't immediately start hiring people. So talk about that jump off point, because I want to tie it back to the family component in the fact that like you just mentioned, you have 2 daughters. So when you turn that offer down with no prospects of another job and no, like, it's not like you had a fat funnel of clients, pinned up, ready to go.
I'll be very honest. I had a $38,000 runway. That was my runway.
All right.
And I had kids in private school, 2 cars, a mortgage, bills, right? Like I had
30,000, that 38 was going to go.
The 38,000 was not going very far, right? Like, and so I knew, and for me, the motivation was like, I knew what my runway was. And I was like, we got to make this happen, right? Because the reason that I decided to go out on my own is, number one, I didn't want to go and do it all over again and not have equity and not do that thing. But also my personal life, like I felt very called that I need to reprioritize my lifestyle for my family, what was most important. And in the 3 pillars that I lead my life with are faith, family, and freedom. Right. So I said, like, the only way I can live out these 3 pillars in my life is to control what I do professionally. Right. And this is not begrudging anyone that does a W-2. This was just what worked for my life. Right. Like there's a lot of wonderful W-2 jobs out there. I do not begrudge at all. For me, for Jason Pearl, it's what made sense. So I knew that to live out the life I wanted to live, this is what I had to do. And I will be quite honest, like Nacre Consulting, even though I have 2 people that work with me, it's still a lifestyle business, right? Like I am the success financially of our family lifestyle is all in Nacre Consulting, right? And obviously I have some personal brand stuff that I do, but I needed to go all in, because if I want to live the life I want to live, I need to build a business around that. And that's kind of what I felt so motivated to do. And that's what I ultimately built.
But talk about the headspace. I mean, as a father as well, who started a business with kids in high school, that's stressful, So when you look down at your kids, you think about the 38K you have in the bank and the runway, I want to understand how your head was, how you were processing that component. I have these 2 people, these 2 humans looking at me that are relying on me. And if this doesn't work, that's a scary, scary thing to face. And it takes an incredible amount of confidence and belief and faith and these sorts of things, I'm sure. But for that person listening that feels called to make that jump entrepreneurially, whether it's in sales consulting or any other realm of business,
Mhm.
what was the thought process to say, okay, I'm going to burn the boats? Because that moment is not, it can't be that simple. It has, I would imagine there's some
So
stressors.
for me, the simplest part of it was I did not want to regret trying.
Got it.
And I said, if I fall on my face and fail, like I was a really good VP of sales. I was a really good, director level position. I was a really good division manager, right? I could go get a W-2. Even though I turned one down, I could go get one. But what I couldn't get back is continue to stay on that wheel for me and
And a
just
hamster
not
wheel. Yeah.
the hamster wheel and not get
Yeah.
the progress that I personally was looking for. So for me, I was motivated by not regretting, right? in
Got
in
it.
in this in what is very important to your point, if there's somebody listening out there thinking about doing it, you have to understand your numbers first of all, right? So
Okay.
like I understood my numbers. I knew what my monthly burn was. I knew what I could lower my monthly burn to be. I knew what my timeline was. I knew the type of work I wanted to do, and I knew what my skill set was. So I niched into that and then spent every moment of my waking days telling people what I was doing and wondering if they could introduce me to other clients. I got my first client in 2 weeks and they paid me $7,500 up front in that check. Right. They gave me it was a $15,000 project. I got 7,500 bucks up front, took a picture of that check. And I was like, okay,
Why
this
isn't that framed
basically,
on your wall back
yeah,
there?
right. Like this buys me another
Yeah.
month basically. Right. And that's how
A
I
little
was
breathing
looking at it.
room. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
this is buying me breathing room. Right.
Yeah.
And so I knew my numbers, but I also knew that if I failed, I was going to be okay with it. And one of the things that is important is I used to not be okay with failure. I used to be deathly afraid of failure because I worried about what other people thought of me. When I made this choice, I was like, I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm doing this for faith, family, freedom, for Jason Pearl, for Tiffany Pearl and their children, and to like make a legacy of the
Right.
father that I wanted to be and the provider that I wanted to be for them. So that's why I did it. And anyone that told me I was wrong, I had no space to listen to because I was like, I'm just going to do it. And it
Right.
wasn't that I want to prove you wrong. It was that this is what I know I need to do. And if I fail, I will be able to pick myself off the ground and then go interview for that job and then keep providing
With
the way I
with
want
your
to.
chest stuck out, knowing that
That's right.
you took the chance and you tried, you didn't just sit there scared and wondering what
Nope.
it might be like. And I
Right.
think that, when I hear this, that is a phenomenal example to set for our young people. To have your daughters see you do that
Yep.
will inevitably inspire them to do similar things in their journey in life. Because if they saw dad being timid and scared, talking about his goals and dreams, but not actually acting upon
Yep.
them, that would have been detrimental. Whereas they saw you step
Yeah.
out, and luckily they saw you have success,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's honorable in a big
Yeah.
way. So father to father, kudos for doing
Appreciate
that.
that.
You
Yeah.
probably could have waited till they were older or when it was more
Right.
safe or secure
Yeah.
and stable.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's like, this is the calling. I need to be
Yep.
congruent with my values,
Yeah.
and you made it happen. So yes, I love that. Now, going from an individual solo operator
Mhm.
to having employees, that's another inflection point,
Yeah.
because I'm personally have, up until recently, and actually having conversations with people like you,
Mhm.
have never really wanted to take on more. Always wanted it to just be
Yeah.
selfishly, I guess,
Sure.
enough so that I had time with family and could do what I want to do with my time, but also make a good earning.
Yep.
So but now talking to more consultants
Yep. Sure.
and having a little bit more attention and an interest, it starts you thinking, what does that look like to hire a couple
Yeah.
employees and that sort of thing. So talk to me about the inflection point of going from live, it's still a lifestyle business,
Yep.
but solo operator
Yep.
to slightly scaling up and having employees on staff. Like, what
Sure.
drove that, and what's the dynamic difference?
Sure. So what really drove that is quite honestly the idea of passive income, if I'm just
Mm,
being real, right?
yeah, yeah,
There's only so many hours in the day that I am willing to work, right? There's only so many hours in the week that I'm willing to work so I can continue to honor faith, family, freedom, right? And I realized that the demand that I was creating was going to get to a point that was going to completely put me out of being able to take on any new clients. So through, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn and through networking. And I had known a few people that were they always seemed like so enamored with what I was doing.
Right.
And so we started meeting and talking, and the first gentleman I brought on, I had actually interviewed him at a different company, and it just kind of worked out after a cup of coffee that he was like, "Hey, I actually have a client that I'm thinking about, doing this with. I would love for you to kind of help me through this and be, and would you be into that?" And I said, "Sure, but here's the way it's going to work. Like, if you want the cloud of Nacre Consulting and the multiple years of success and track record and all these things, like, here's how we'll do this. You're gonna bring this in, and I'll be the executive sponsor on the engagement.
Mhm.
I'll work with you, you work with the client, and then we'll figure this out." So we did a test, and it worked out wonderfully. And then we did one more test. We did two tests. Both worked out well. He made money. I made some passive income on it. And then we said, okay, let's formalize this. So then we formalized it. And then he has a book of business that he works with that I'm still, as the president of the company, the executive sponsor of. And the work comes through. I handle all the billing, all the marketing. I do some lead gen, right, for the organization and
Right,
the business,
right,
which
right,
is
right.
why I'm super active on LinkedIn and some other areas. And it just kind of worked because what created is I'm helping this gentleman have the freedom that I have, right? And
Right,
do this really meaningful work for businesses. And he's able to provide that same thing for his family because
right.
we shared similar values. And then it just started working. And the more business he brings on, we have it structured where, there's percentage splits and things like that, where he
If
gets
you
the
bring it
line.
in, he's
Right.
servicing, there's a cut, and if
There's a
he
cut.
brings it
Yeah.
in, there's an additional cut.
Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yep. So
Are they in
there's,
contractors or W-2?
so they're contractors. That's
Okay.
that's how they've worked.
Mhm.
The one of the guys I work with is, we're looking at making it more payroll driven, more W-2. That's more maybe what his family needs. The
Right, right.
other person I work with, like, they love the fact that it's contractor work. They do some real estate investing and some other things, so it just works. But they're both very talented in the sales consulting realm, and quite honestly, both of them have better skills in certain areas that I have,
Well,
right? And
yeah, that's the best. That's the best
and
setup. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm not trying to hire clones of myself, right? I'm trying to hire people
Mm,
to fill the gap so we can provide the right level of service to our clients, right? And
okay.
we're not trying to be everything to everybody, but there are certain things within the sales realm. Like one of the guys I work with, he is an amazing sales coach. He's so into the nitty-gritty process. Will listen to phone calls, will, do a lot of those things, right? And he's wonderful at it. I'm doing a lot more higher level strategy, leadership, growth level consulting, where the work that I do, and to kind of pivot to do that, isn't always available for me. So he does that work really, really well. So it was born out of passive income, and then it turned into a more complete growth consultant offering for our clients that makes them very happy
Yeah, it sounds like it's a win-win-win all around.
all
So
around.
you're
Yep.
winning, the
Yep. That's right.
contractors, your consultants are winning, and
Right.
as well as obviously the clients are. They're getting a diversified skill set and more
Yep.
availability. And I imagine you guys partner up time to time.
We do. Yep.
So yeah, okay. So
Yep.
it
And
sounds.
in addition to that, I'm sorry to jump
No,
in,
cut
but
you. Go
like,
ahead.
there are things that I do very much like an employer, where, like, for example, the beginning of this year, we had our first ever Nacre Summit, right? So
Nice.
I took
Okay.
my team to Naples, Florida, right? We rented an Airbnb. We had some great dinners, went to the beach during the day, put sticky notes on the walls of the
Yeah,
Airbnb,
yeah. I
and
love that
strategized and
masterminding.
did things,
Yeah.
right. And did that whole thing. But it was a fully paid for trip for them to say, hey, thank you, right? I'm
Right.
reinvesting in you guys, and you're investing in me in this business, and let's keep growing this. So the principles of taking care of people, regardless if they're 1099 or W-2 or whatever the case may be, I very much give back because they're giving to me, and I need to get, it's a two-way street, right? So I think that's very important if you're thinking about bringing somebody on to your consultancy.
Very good. Well, how do you get clients? You mentioned referrals and
Mhm.
the network. You mentioned social media and so those
Yep.
marketing arms. Are there any other means in which you secure new clients that someone who's in that who's in a similar boat might be able to emulate?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that worked very well for me early on is I got connected to a couple managing partners at private equity firms
Ah,
that had
mhm.
portfolio companies,
Portfolio. Yeah.
and they were like lower middle market portfolio companies. So I work with companies, like the largest company we work with today is, I think, like 60 million bucks, but our focus is in that sub $10 million market, right? So it's that $3 to $10 million market. We're trying to get them to double digits as quick as possible, but make sure it's consistent and repeatable. So I was introduced to a managing partner of a private equity firm here locally in the Western New York area. And he had a portfolio company that he needed help with, specifically building out a sales team and really professionalizing it. I did that for him and that team. I'm actually 6 years later still engaged with that organization.
Wow, this is a
Because
lot.
we've done some wonderful work together.
Mhm.
And that private equity company has referred me into some other portfolio companies, have referred me to other private equity companies that have portfolio needs in that lower middle market. So that has been a nice feeder outside of things that I generate. Referral obviously is big in our business, right?
Right.
But the reason I started a personal brand 3 years ago is I started a podcast, right? And then I did a newsletter, and I've kind of done that whole thing and tried to get myself out there because everybody's story is unique,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I do that to attract and detract, right? Attract the companies and
The
the
right
people,
people
the
that
leaders I
are
want to work
picking up
with.
on your vibe. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
detract the people I don't want to work with, right?
Right.
Like I'm not a burn and churn guy. Like I believe in the people, I believe in the work that they do, and I believe in leadership. So if I've actually turned down business where people say like, hey, we want to pay you this, but we want you to come and fire the team and then like manage to these metrics. I'm like, listen, that's not what I'm good at. There's other people out there, and God bless them. They can do that work. That's just not me. Right.
Yeah.
So I just, attract and detract.
Have you ever had to fire a client?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any
Yep.
stories?
So essentially it's not like a hellacious type of story. Essentially what it was is that as a consultant, and this was early on, and this was a really big learning lesson for me, I was consulting for a company that had a founder and a CEO. They were never on the same page,
Yeah.
and they really just wanted to do what they wanted to do, and they didn't want to listen to me. So at one point in time, I just walked in and said, listen, this isn't working for you and it's not working for me. You're paying me too much money to not get the results, and I'm giving you too many good ideas for you to not implement. This
Ooh,
isn't working. I believe that we should stop working together in the next 15 days. And here's my offboarding plan. And they were like,
wow.
what do you
That's
mean?
actually very thorough and very professional approach. The
Yeah.
offboarding plan, I like that as an added plus. I would have never even thought about
Right.
including that.
Right.
That's a
Because
good
listen,
tactic.
like we talk about burning the ships when I like went all in, but when it
Yeah.
comes to relationships with businesses, even if you're not happy with the people that you're working with, like, my dad used to say, you'll never spit in the wind, right? There's other analogies that you can use too, but it's like, it's just one of those things where it's not working out and it's okay, right?
Right.
Like it's okay to part and say, this didn't work. Let's shake hands. Let's be respectful. Let me make sure I get you on the right path before
Mhm.
I just leave you high and dry. You pay me what you owe me and all these things, then we'll walk away friends. And the interesting thing about that is that client, I still talk to both the founder and that old CEO, and we've referred each other
I was going to
business,
ask you.
right?
Yep.
So
Okay. There
so
it
it,
is.
so that happened. But now I've also said no a lot to new clients, right? Like, so
But have you ever
firing a
said
client's different than saying
yes?
no.
But have you ever said yes to bad money? Or maybe
Yes,
early days,
I did.
in that runway. Okay,
I
what's that
did.
story? Because
And
I
it
know I have
burns.
mine.
Yeah. So actually it was through one of my consultants. And we brought on this deal, this company, and we do a pretty thorough discovery process.
Mhm.
And I was reviewing the discovery with my consultant, and there was red flags. And I was like, hey, this is a red flag. This is a red flag. This is a red flag. And he was like, yeah, you're right. He's like, but there's this and there's this and there's this. And I was like, okay. I was like, and this company had a track record of hiring and firing every outside agency they ever worked with.
Ugh,
And I
yeah.
was like, listen, we're going to be no different unless we make massive changes.
Okay.
And ultimately, we did work with them for 18 months.
Wow. Good.
They reduced our fee after 6 months because they were struggling. And then they out and out fired us 90 days after they downgraded. And it quite honestly was a blessing that we got
Usually
terminated
is.
from
Right.
that.
Hmm.
We just took on a client for the money that we were not going to really be able to fully change. And that was a learning experience for me because I knew all the red flags, but I allowed the client to come in out of necessity to fill a client for a consultant.
Right.
And I won't ever do that again. Um, because it just is, it's bad money.
Well, the burning the boats concept doesn't just apply to starting the business. It's a
Right.
continuous thing. You
Correct.
have to trust your ICP, your,
Mhm.
whatever your best customer
Yep.
looks like.
Yep.
If the red flags are there, you got to burn the boat.
Sure.
It's more time with better
Sure.
prospects. And especially in this line of business, I mean, I remember talking to another consultant, Ken Lundeen. He was saying
Mhm.
how if you feel that you need to be tested, like if they're offering asking for certain services that you
Yep.
don't normally do, but you're like,
Right.
maybe I can prove myself here. I can
Sure.
be tested if I test myself and
Sure.
not get the money out of it. Uh, you need not be tested, right?
Correct.
Like
Yep.
just
Yep.
stick with what you know
Yeah.
and stick with what you're capable of, and don't be afraid to walk away from
Yeah.
particularly from bad money, even if the work is the right work. But if you're not, that's my most recent situation was, they had said yes to my pricing, but just through the interactions, it was a self-development playbook
Mhm.
that we were going to build out, and that was just the engagement for that.
Yep.
And pricing was aligned, but the interactions were very off. And
Yep.
so on that note alone, the communication over email, it was already turning into like a subservient thing. It wasn't like
Sure.
I was coming in on a level that they were looking to get input and advice and support with this deliverable. Just knocked the water bottle off my desk. But yeah, the
Yeah.
personal relationship aspect of it too, I think is
Sure.
one of those things to keep in mind.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is if you do this long enough, you're going to have those situations, right?
Right,
So,
right.
anyone that's out there and they say they're a unicorn consultant and they've never had an issue or they've only everything they touch turns to gold, it's like at some point in time you're going to touch something that doesn't turn to
Well,
gold.
you just haven't
Now,
been doing it long enough
right,
or enough,
right,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
And it was one of those situations where as a consultant also, like I have very specific payment terms. And I bill in the beginning of the month, right, for work to be rendered throughout that month. I
Interesting.
don't work
And then
and
to
then get paid.
invoice.
Right.
Mm,
It's just the way as a consultant, that's the way it works. If I'm gonna block my time and I'm gonna provide these things, this is the way the payment terms work. And when
mm,
people start trying to negotiate your terms and negotiate the way it works and all these things, that's a red flag. And
it is.
I've in 6 years, I've never had to like charge off any bad debt, right? And I just did that with this client I'm referencing because I just couldn't spend any more time and energy on it. I basically they were 2 months behind, and I said, you know what? I'm wiping my hands clean of this. We're done. I'm
Wow.
not going to spend any more time or effort. I'll take this as an L, and I'll move on with my head held high. And that's just what we have to do, right?
Wow.
So,
Wow.
bad money's real.
Yeah, no, this is some real lessons.
Yeah,
For those that are in a revenue leadership role, whether you're an SDR manager director or your VP of sales, and you want to advise down the road and maybe do your own consultancy, these are real stories to keep in mind. So hopefully this helps you navigate those
yeah,
waters. And if you're already in that seat in your early days in your career, or even been doing this for a while and you think about scaling up, again, real world examples that you can tap into. Now,
sure.
final question on your practice. You have a finance background.
Mhm.
You know the numbers really well,
Yep.
right? Will you ever sell Nacre Consulting? Is that the long-term objective? Maybe do you think you'll have it? Will
So,
you
so
be
that's a
for an
great
exit?
question. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, my answer to that is I don't know. Okay.
Mhm.
This is a when I said it's a lifestyle business, this is what I mean. I believe that there will be a sellable asset at some point in time, but I am not waiting or like working towards a sale. I love what I do. I'm good at it. I can do this for the rest of my life, right? In some capacity. Now, I could
Literally,
have one client
literally.
when I'm
Mhm.
80 if I really
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to, and I'm
that's
still good enough,
that's the beauty
right?
of this. It's like golf.
That's
Yeah.
right. So that's the beauty of it.
Mhm.
The way I look at it is the income I earn I'm investing it. I'm creating multiple streams of income on my own through the money I make through my consultancy. So I'm
Mhm.
being aggressive with what I earn and putting it in other places so I can set myself up so I don't have to worry about, well, I need to sell this for $3 million so I can retire, right? Or
Mhm,
whatever
mhm.
it is.
Because you have
Um,
other
because I have other
perpetual
things going
things
on.
going on. Yeah.
Right. And
So I imagine one of
I'm
those is
far
real
from,
estate, you know.
yeah, I'm far from being there, by the way. But like the fact of the matter is, I'd rather have the money come in through Nacre and me have the ability to figure out where I
Yeah,
want to put it.
yeah, yeah. If you can,
Uh,
if you, that's the leverage, right? If you can create revenue,
yep.
then allows you to create assets, right?
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
And we should have an episode just on, on
Yeah.
passive income and those
Totally.
sorts of things.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have a growth assessment. Let's switch
Mhm.
gears. Let's talk a
Sure.
little bit about some best practice and tactics around
Mhm.
driving revenue specifically in our
Yep.
final few minutes here.
Sure.
So I know you launched your growth assessment relatively recently, and
Yep.
you were talking with me
Mhm.
offline about that. And what, just for the audience, what kind of teed up that topic for us was the real like underpinning question of this show. What is the toughest problem that you're seeing? I asked Jason this. What's the toughest problem you're seeing in driving revenue for B2B sales organizations? And so we went down this discussion around this growth assessment. So talk about this holistic view that
Mhm.
a lot of organizations aren't taking in order to drive revenue.
Yeah. So over the course of the past 6 years, one of the things that I found to be the hardest when it was working with clients was the beginning discovery phases of
Mhm.
working with a client. We oftentimes come in having meetings with the CEO or the president or somebody in a fairly high decision making role. And what we need to understand what they need to grow is a lot of information. And it's not just sales, right? It's not just revenue, right? It's a holistic view of the business, right? So leadership, org structure, ownership structure, right? And then, how, what has your turnover been like? What's the leadership like? What's the revenue, sales, marketing? What funnels do you have set up, right? A holistic approach. What technologies are you using, right? Who's your ideal customer? What's your new revenue percentage versus your existing revenue, right? What's your renewal versus your new, and what, looking at those over multiple years. So what we found was that we were struggling to really pull this information out of the clients because they may want to just focus on this end. So
Mhm.
what we decided to do is, instead of really struggle and wrestle with this, we created a product that we coined our Nacre Growth Assessment, where if somebody wants to come in and work with us, we have this proprietary digital assessment that they have to fill out. They fill out, it comes to us, we schedule a 60-minute review, and then we talk about what we learned, we clarify, and then we point them in the direction of where we think they should look to grow. If
Okay.
they would like to hire us to help them with that, then we do that. But even if they don't want to hire us, we give them something to walk away with, and we have an understanding of their business.
Right.
It's not
Right.
100% understanding, call it 70 or 80%, right? Where oftentimes we are fighting to get 30 or 40% understanding of what's happening in the business. Therefore, this has created a really good jump off point so we can make strong educated decisions on, do we want this client? Can we help them? What are
Mhm.
their main needs, and where should we point them to grow?
Yeah, and I can relate. They will assume, and often maybe be correct in what that problem that needs to be solved and what the solution that they're proposing is, right? I mean, as a
Right.
consultant, right, you understand the problem, you come up with a
Sure.
framework,
Yep.
you develop work streams and you work it out.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, taking a step back and really questioning their assumption a little bit and having a more holistic view of it. The challenge I would see though in that is, if you're dealing with companies that are sub 10 million
Mhm.
specifically, a lot of this they're just not going to know. A lot of it is, I would imagine. I know. Do you find that where,
We do.
and if so, like, how do you solve for that in your assessment phase if they don't really have a lot of the data points that you're talking about, like the dichotomy of different
Sure.
analytics?
So what we'll do is we'll be able to say, like, hey, this is, you're not really quite sure on this. Now they should be able to, if they've been in business for 3 years, they should know like their revenue numbers and like their profit numbers. Like you can pull that from
Yeah, yeah.
QuickBooks or whatever, right?
Top line stuff. Yes,
Top line, yeah,
absolutely.
right,
Yeah. You've been founder led mostly during those
right,
3 years. You might have one or two salespeople,
yep,
but we're not really copious about tracking everything from start to finish because we've just
right,
been building while we fly.
And so what happens is when we do this 60-minute meetup, like we'll look at those areas and say, well, can you talk to me, if you don't have the numbers, talk to me a little bit about like how you feel here, like what's going on here, what do you think your biggest issues are, do like a SWOT analysis type of thing. And that is extremely telling to begin with, because we start to understand how these leaders are thinking, what they want out of the organization, where they think the problems are versus our educated opinion on probably where it actually is. And we like to partner with both the leadership and the rest of the organization. So we're fairly bold when we talk to leaders and say like, hey, listen, like this is an issue. You may not think it's an issue because of this, but our experience shows that this is an issue. Therefore, as we go through and talk about working together, this is something that we would like you to keep in mind and put some attention towards. So, right. When we work with sub 10 million, we really like the 3+, right? So there's enough revenue coming in where they have some leadership built and things of that nature. We'll work with well-capitalized startups, but we like people that are making enough money where A, we can get paid, and B, there's enough work that we can do to come in and say like, hey, these are the levers that we can pull to help you grow. So whether it's, variable compensation audits, go-to-market assessments, playbook building, all sorts of things like, the strategy of the revenue models, partnerships, things of that nature, we can look at all of those realms and figure out what's the best and easiest path forward to generate not just revenue, consistent foundational revenue that is going to help them get better. We're not a magic wand and a shot in the arm that makes them grow and then we go away and they don't grow. What we care most about is replacing ourselves, right? So they can continue to grow. And it's just another story of seeds that we helped water that grew into big trees.
Well, this just came up in my head now, hearing you talk about that. And if you go back to your payment terms discussion, do you ever, or have you ever, like structured this based on outcomes? Because if you're saying that that's what you're here for, is that outcome, right? That change, that long-term benefit that sticks. Do you tie your fees to that? Or because you were explaining earlier that your fees are billed up front and then services are rendered and then you invoice.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to,
dependent upon, right? So we do project work and retainer work. Okay. So if we're doing a variable comp audit or a go-to-market assessment, that's a fixed fee, right? Like this is a fixed fee. This is what it is. If we are engaging in it like a strategic growth initiative,
right?
Depending on the opportunity, we will say, hey, we'll lower our retainer fee to take some points on the backside, so we both have skin in the game. And I'm a big fan of that. But what I learned over time, you need to understand the business before you commit to the skin.
Right.
So
it's know your bets.
You gotta know it's right. You gotta know where you're placing your bets. Yeah. So we have tried to productize some of our business. So we get a snapshot and a real look into the business. And then if it graduates into a larger type of retainer arrangement, we will ask for upside. And quite honestly, I love that because as a consultant, they're happy to cut those checks because they've seen it, right? And those checks, when you negotiate properly, those are big checks, right?
And it also makes marketing and selling your business, I'd imagine, that much easier too. If you have outcomes that are proven and you're willing to, to have that discussion up front that, look, there's not a whole lot of risk you're taking up front. It's mainly going to come on the back end that when you see the results. So that's going to be a favorable position.
For sure.
So this assessment, when you go through it, right, every company is different, but you've ran it a bunch of times, I'm sure by now. And there's all sorts of juicy stuff that comes out of assessments, right? Whether it's an interview based, or you're looking at data, or you're inspecting the systems, if you have a pragmatic tool like yours. But what are the net, in terms of top issues, right? Going back to what's preventing us from driving revenue, what's helping drive revenue, the big tough problems. So having a holistic view of the business and starting there, A1, got it. But if I did that assessment, I went through and I looked at all the last 25 that you did, what are the top issues or opportunities that you're seeing that are netting out of these assessments?
Yeah. So there's a number, clarity in model, right? So there's a lot of companies that will see that like the clarity in their revenue model is just not appropriate, right? They maybe started one way, but it's not working or it's not amounting to what they need it to amount to, and they've been singularly focused. So revenue model is in clarity on that model has been one of the things we've come up with. We're in a recessive environment, right? So a lot of people are looking at their go-to-market teams, right? Like, is my go-to-market team good enough? Are they doing the right things, or what's happening, and all of those things. So we've seen a lot of go-to-market assessment questions happen when they say, like, we just don't think our people are very good, or we don't think they're working hard enough. And that's something that we really have to peel back and uncover. And the only way we can do that is actually doing a go-to-market assessment. We'll do pipeline reviews, right? We'll do one-on-one meetings with the team, ask them a bunch of questions, understand what they're doing.
Oh, so this is an additional assessment to the growth assessment. Then you have a go-to-market assessment.
Correct. So essentially the growth assessment is the overarching like intake of discovery. And then we'll say, like, okay, here's some issues. What would you like? Here's where we think you need to focus on. What would you like to prioritize first? And oftentimes people are saying, I need a go-to-market assessment. And what I would tell you is, it's not that a lot of these people need to be turned over. They need to be led better. They need to be managed better and directed more efficiently on what they should be doing on a daily basis to get outcomes. Right. The clarity. Right. Yeah. So that has been.
So what does that equate to? Is that like having a better playbook? Is that better communication? How does one develop better clarity in their go-to-market? What are the solutions to that?
So I mean, it's a broad, there's a number of them, right? Like you had mentioned, like ICP, right? Like I just recently worked with a client. They were selling, the activities that they were doing, like it made sense, but they were selling to a market that was counterintuitive to what they were doing. They're a $3 million organization, right? And they've got VC backing, right? They're looking to grow, and they're taking big swings at large enterprise accounts.
Whale hunting.
And it's like they're whale hunting. I'm like, listen, you need to prove that you can sell the small before you can get to the big.
So get here, get some velocity.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And then we can graduate and we can build that motion. But it's like, we need to show consistent revenue. We need consistent yeses, and then we can graduate, and then we can graduate. But they were big whale hunting, and that was problematic. And we've been able to fix that, and they've been able to bring revenue in, and they just got a commitment for more money. Right. So it's like, these are the things that, in certain situations, it's ultimately sometimes being managed by like, oh, I need to be a 9-figure business. It's like, how about you become a 7-figure business or an 8-figure business before you worry about being a 9-figure business? Because COVID's over, right? We live in a world where valuations are down. You need to go back to proving that you can actually sell, because the money's going to dry up if you can't prove it. So those are some of the issues that we've dealt with recently. And then I run into really wacky variable compensation plans. Like being a sales guy and growing up in sales, just like I did, like you got to pay your people. Like you just got to pay your people. Like if you're a leader out there and you're listening, like pay your people well, pay them for when revenue comes in, when the cash register rings, pay them, because they'll keep making it ring. But so many are so tight with their budget, and we have to go buy this software to do it. It's like, okay, well, can you do without the software, or can you do without the revenue? Your choice. Revenue's the lifeblood of businesses, sure. Right? Revenue's the lifeblood of businesses.
Right.
Get the revenue, pay the people, rinse, repeat.
Well, let me ask you a question in response to that. The theme these days is efficient growth. Right? To your point, COVID is over. We don't have the trajectory of digital transformation the way we used to. Things are back to reality, if you will, right? Or we're in a retracted environment, as you say.
Sure.
So if the theme is to do more with less, and we know what that lends itself to, artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Right. So what are you seeing in that realm then, right? Is that the response? Is that what people are asking about? Where do we go with this in the short order in terms of incorporating AI to be more efficient in our growth?
So I think, I've used ChatGPT. I have got the $20 paid subscription, and, I'm messing with the Google one too, and all that type of stuff. They're very valuable. What I find most valuable, and what you could find valuable for you as an organization, is like, how does it shortcut you to help get outputs, right? It's not set it and forget it and let the computer tell you everything you need to say and you just rinse and repeat. Because I've seen some terrible sales emails generated from ChatGPT, right? Because people are being lazy and they're playing.
But wait, we've also seen it shit ton of terrible emails come from salespeople.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Like, if
Right.
not even, I would say, if you were to test them, entry level, first couple of years as a seller to Chat
Yep.
GPT, I don't know, I might put my money on an artificial and I wouldn't say Chat GPT. Let me just for my clarity, for the question, I'm not even referring to Chat GPT in these public
Right.
models. I'm thinking more of Lavender, Lead
Yep.
IQ, TrueBase. These companies are
Yep.
creating ChatGPT based AI
Yes.
tools that are displacing a lot of the functions that we do as sellers or as
Yep.
SDRs.
And I think so with that, I would agree, it comes down to the right people, right? If you can find the right person to run the right playbooks that are AI generated, and you can create personal with the AI generation the right way, speaking directly to your ICP,
Yeah.
problem, solution. I believe when you talk about efficient revenue, that's how you can create efficient revenue. And people say like, oh, AI is going to take over the world. It's like, well, you have to adjust and make sure that you're using it properly for efficient revenue, because there's still a human need, right?
For
Especially
AI,
when it comes to
for
sellers,
AI, but not
for AI.
AGI. Artificial general intelligence, when it reaches that point, which isn't, Google CEO has already talked about this. Elon
Right.
talks about this.
Sure.
AGI is when it's as smart as a human, or not, or if not smarter,
Yep.
and can do everything a human can do. You think about deep fake, phone communication. So this is where I'm
Yep.
kind of geeking out here, and we'll end here. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I put a post up recently on LinkedIn about this. Go check it out. Is actually on Twitter. It was like, the future will be SDR. There will be some, not like completely replacing all salespeople and SDRs,
Yep.
but I genuinely believe that there will be an SDR AI bot who can manage every channel, who can show up on LinkedIn, who can show up on phone, who can show up on email. You can have a fully interactive dialogue, and they'll just
Yep.
be, hi, I'm your AI rep. How can I help you? The same way we do web chat, but more
Yep.
advanced. And if you think about it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have never thought you'd done all your grocery shopping and clothes
Sure.
shopping and all of this
Yep.
with over an app on your phone. But now
Yep.
here we are. And so I don't know. Do you think we will get to that point in the near future? Do you think that's where AI is? It's not going to take over the world, but once we have true AGI models, I feel like a lot of sales and marketing people feel too comfortable, right? To your point, you need to be the best of the best in your
Yep.
lane, because
Yep.
we are going to downsize. We don't need 10, we don't need 15 SDRs. Now we need 4, because we have all
Correct.
of this going.
And I would agree with that. I would agree with the fact that the headcount side of things when it comes to sales is going to be greatly affected, and the playbook needs to be ran the right way from an organizational standpoint to understand what it is. Because the mistake that people are making is they'll jump into AI and be like, oh, I don't need any of this. I'm going to fire my whole sales team and I'm just going to work this. And it's like, well, you're going to need to work this out and it's going to fail a bunch.
Right.
And then
You
you're
got
going
to
to miss all that
orchestrate it
revenue.
still. You need
Right.
human
You still have
agency to oversee it. Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe it's the future. I mean, the technology wave is going to get faster and faster.
Yeah.
And for guys like you and I, like, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of what needs to happen, but the only thing that I can control is the outcomes I get for my clients. So the more outcomes I get, and if I can leverage the right type of technology, I can hopefully continue to stay relevant, and time will tell whether or not guys like you or I can do that. But I'm going to continue to focus on those outcomes.
Awesome. Well, this has been a phenomenal discussion. Thank you, Jason, very much. Have learned a lot in terms of starting a sales consultancy, running a sales consultancy, and the philosophies that you have going into that. So really appreciate you being so open with us on this. Where do you want to send people to learn more and follow you?
Yeah. So just check out nacreconsulting.com. You can go on there. There's, links to connect with me, to find me on LinkedIn, and, all that type of stuff. The growth assessment's on there if that's something that you're interested in, but check out nacreconsulting.com, NACRE consulting.com.